Today our speakers are from Google, and we're really excited about having this event. If people will recall, last year we actually had an event with Lucas upstairs from Redknee, and actually there was a blizzard that day, so I'm glad the weather gods are cooperating with us today. And thanks very much for coming out. This is a great turnout for Easter Monday. Wanted to thank our sponsors, MarketWire and Dundane Multimedia, also the CWTA, and our sponsor for the event is the TAL Group. And the TAL Group is a company in the resource space. They're doing a lot of work in the Google Android space, and they're actually teaching a lot of programs around that. So there are a few people here from TAL Group tonight. If you wanted to talk with David Campbell, I think he's standing in the very back, and he's going to do a jumping jack right now. So, okay, there he is right there. So talk to David. They're doing some really cool things if you wanted to find out more. Thanks to the Mars team for the great setup again. So Alan and Janet and Andrea and Don and Peter and the rest of the team, they always really take care of the events, and we have the bar open again, which is great. Today's event is with Google, of course. This is actually our third event with Google. We did one back in 2006 with Roger Scabawius, who I think was employee 1 or 2 with the Waterloo team. And we did one in 2008 as well. How many people here were at either of those events? Okay, so we got some hardcore Momo people. That's great. Thank you. So first, we'll see a couple of presentations from Alex Nicolau and Punit, Soni, and they'll go over what Google is doing in the space right now. After the presentation, we'll get into Q&A, and we've got 2 microphones set up right here in the aisle, so don't be shy and come up and introduce yourself and ask the question. So we'll start off with Punit, and I'll give an intro or bio overview for both Punit and Alex. So first I'll start with Alex, though. Alex joined Google. Alex Nicolau was a software engineer at Google. In 2006, he joined the company in Waterloo. His focus is around the development of mobile applications and Chrome OS products. As an engineering manager, mobile apps include Gmail, Buzz, YouTube, amongst others, while Chrome is focused on building the Chrome OS for ARM platforms. Up until 2006, Alex was president and board member of Aruna Inc., or Aruna.ca Inc., a startup developing a unique RDBMS based on text search algorithms and data structures. Prior to that, Alex is part of Liquid Media, a startup developing real-time kernel extensions and Java virtual machines. In '96, Alex and Jay Steele won the games category for the Java Cup competition, and Jay Steele, congrats for the exit with Vigo last week, so kudos to Jay and team. In the early '90s, Alex was principal investigator or inventor for 6 algorithm patents. He holds an honors degree in mathematics, in computer science, and he holds a master's of math in computer graphics, both from Waterloo. Punit Soni is by way of Valley, now living in Waterloo. He's the lead product manager responsible for Google mobile apps efforts. He joined Google in 2007 and has launched 2 products in the news book domain, and most recently, Google Buzz for mobile. Before that, he was a graduate of Wharton with an MBA in finance and entrepreneurial management. He's done stints at Wharton Ventures and Intel Capital in the wireless group. And before that, he was managing and developing products in Cadence Design Systems in the semiconductor space. Besides his business degree, he has a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering. So a warm welcome for Punit, and then Alex will take the stage. Thank you.
Excellent. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much for having us here so we can talk about what we think about the mobile web in general and what Google is doing in terms of, in this space, what our initiatives are about. So the way we'll structure this particular presentation is we'll start by discussing some broad level trends, what we see in the market, in the mobile market, and we'll want to frame our hypothesis or our bets in the context of those trends. And then once we do that, we would like to spend a little bit more time kind of discussing what specifically we're doing, what products we are building, and go from there. We wouldn't want this to be very talk-heavy, so it'll be good if we'll just intersperse a lot of demos of features that we're interested in, products that we have recently launched or built, and see where it goes from there. Okay, so the topic of the talk is, where in the world are we going? Or as Alex says, where in the World Wide Web are we going? So let's start. Just to kind of step back and look at the trends, and most of these things you guys are pretty aware of. So this is more of framing the conversation and seeing where it goes. So it's obvious there's rapid transformations in the mobile landscape. There is fundamental shifts, and we try to kind of look at it from a 10,000 feet level and say, what are the major things that are shifting? What dimensions can we look at? And obviously, hardware is a big one. You have faster, powerful superphones. These phones are like supercomputers. They are almost an extension of you in terms of how you use it. And then from there comes the users. You have, because these phones are so powerful, the users are using these in completely different ways. If you look back at the last couple of years, the way phones have been used by users has been completely, like there's a fundamental shift. And this shift, we contend, is not just a technological shift, it's a sociological shift. And then finally, platforms. This is like a catch-all bucket. We wanted to talk about all the other non-hardware related things that are shifting. And so open devices, bandwidth is increasing, you're seeing new pricing models, and all of these things are coming together and kind of shifting our landscape. So let's take a second to look at the hardware. So if this is an interesting comparison, this is a 1980s supercomputer, Cray machine, costs around $10 million plus, maximum solid state storage 32 gig, main memory 32 meg. So like this is a powerful machine, number crunching, big time machine during the 1980s. And now we can compare that with the Nexus. 32.5 gig maximum memory, 512 main memory, $500. So these computers, these phones that you have in your pocket, they are actually supercomputers. And not only are they have great specifications, but they also have great features. We call them, they're an extension to your senses. So what does that mean? You have wonderful touchscreens that you can use to interact with these phones. You have beautiful quality cameras that you can take vivid photographs and then put it out there. You have microphones. You can talk to your phone. The phone will talk back to you. You have constantly connected to the cloud. So think of all the things that you know and your knowledge. It's completely enhanced by the fact that you have a cloud connection, and you can immediately win that bet that you had with your friend in the bar, or keep on top of the scores, etc. And then finally, these things have GPS, so they know what your location is. You can orient yourself. It can help you navigate the world around you. So if you put this all together, touch, vision, voice, it's got enhanced brain basically because of the cloud connection, and GPS. You literally have a very intimate device that's basically an extension of what you do. And people are using this daily in new ways to enhance their social and their communication tasks. Okay. So what's happening with people, with users? So big shift in usage patterns, right? I mean, there's a huge sociological shift. And the reason we put the sociological, put emphasis on the sociological word was because we see that people are relating to their phones differently. These are some quotes that we have picked up, kind of looking around, seeing how people are using our phones. And this is interesting. If I don't get an SMS every few hours, I don't feel loved. So you're not just interested in all the people who are standing around you, all the people you're physically connected to, all the people who are in your family, your friends that you know and you kind of talk to, but you're also interested in all the people who communicate to you with your phone. And if they obviously don't connect with you regularly, then you don't feel loved. My phone is like having my friends in a box. I feel uncomfortable if I left it behind. If you if you go away and you missed your phone, you're completely isolated. You don't know how to contact people. There are only like a couple of numbers you may remember. You don't even know how to talk to these guys. So it's basically, people feel uncomfortable when their phone's not here. And then this new location sharing, this sharing location stuff is very cool. But if your girlfriend is on Buzz, she'll be stalking you like crazy. And by the way, we have seen like very similar things talked about on Buzz. So, what's the analysis? Like, you have a phone which is very intimately connected to you, and it also allows you the ability to broadcast a lot of information, experiences, location, people, tasks, things that you're kind of going through or doing, photographs. It allows you to broadcast this to people. But on the flip side, you also need a lot of effective controls that you can give to the user so they know how to actually broadcast, how to actually provide this or pass this information across. So with these usage patterns, we have to come up with very interesting applications which can actually leverage these usage patterns and leverage the hardware. And so our hypothesis was mobile devices now facilitate and enhance our social interactions. They are a key part of our social graph. We use them almost all the time. I can see at least 10 people in the audience who are texting right now, and a few others who are trying to take photographs. So, and they're constantly on and constantly connected. They are our gateway to the world. So quickly, the third dimension that we want to talk about was technology trends. And I don't want to belabor this for too long because I would like to get into the meat of the discussion, which is what are we going to do with all these things? So what are the big technology trends that we see? Obviously, we see these open platforms are proliferating. A good example of it is Android. You may not realize, but Android is only a year and a half old. It came out, there was a phone, G1, that people started using. It had a keypad, it had a touch screen, it was good. And then a few months later, we had the G2 come in, which was a much more enhanced version of G1, and it worked pretty well. And then a few months later, or recently, we launched the Nexus. This is a significant, like 1 gigahertz processor, 5 megapixel camera. It's got amazing specs. You can do a lot with this phone. This is literally almost like one of the laptops that you carry around in your house. And so we're noticing that with the open platforms and with these devices that are coming, there's so many other devices we can talk about, like the Droid, that's pretty popular also. And then there's a huge assembly line of a lot of other Android devices which are coming in, all built on the same open platform. We're also noticing that consumers are customizing their devices with apps. So this is interesting, and I think there's a hat tip to Apple in here, because Apple really figured out how to take this structured feature set and put it and encapsulate it into an app and then create a marketplace around it so people could download, install on their phones. The downloading, installing on your phone is very interesting because the same phone, which is just a cookie-cutter phone that everybody can buy and your neighbor has and neighbor's neighbor has, now when you actually install these apps on them, you install apps that you need. You install those things that are tuned to your use cases. And so therefore, you personalize and customize your phone. And so every phone is different now. The same piece of hardware now makes a lot more sense for you very differently from your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor. And we also started noticing that people are consuming these apps like media. You're bored, you're kind of standing in line waiting for something. You download an app, you play with it, you delete it, you're done. It's like listening to a song, you heard it, it's gone. If you like it, you may play a lot more. If you don't like it, then you will go and download something else or listen to something else. And that's how apps are being consumed. So these, whether it's native or web, these apps basically have become very unitary consumption devices. Then 3 other trends quickly to kind of dwell upon. One is, obviously we touched upon it, flat rate data pricing combined with fast networks. You have really fast networks, you have even faster networks coming in, 4G, WiMAX, and you have huge bandwidths. And then you have the business models which are evolving. So all you can eat, here's a flat rate for data. And every country where we see a flat rate model being adopted, we see an explosion in data usage. And obviously, data usage, not just search, but native, but also web apps. And then obviously, the cloud is always accessible because of all the other things we were talking about. You always have access and connection to the cloud. And then we come to the kind of the last point, which I think is the thrust of our conversation going forward, which is that with the hardware and the usage and all these technology trends, we step back and we think about what is it that is our delivery mechanism. How do we actually reach consumers, and how do we actually provide consumers with the features and products that they need? And then we look at our products and we realize that mobile browsers, they are the killer app. They are becoming super capable. They're able to do things that hitherto were impossible, and you had to rely on the native apps to do it. And so therefore, there's Android, there's Safari, Opera, Bolt, and few more other coming in. To discuss further what the advantages of the mobile browsers are and how we believe that this is the killer app and how we are investing in it, I'm going to ask my colleague Alex to come in and continue the conversation.
Thanks. So I want to get started with a couple of anecdotes to give you sort of my context for why I've come to believe the things I believe and what the background is that drives these thoughts. So the first anecdote has to do with shortly after I had started at Google, we were building two native apps that were quite significant efforts. One was a J2ME app for reading your Gmail that you could download and use on any of a large number of J2ME devices that were on the market. And the other was a J2ME app for doing Google Maps, where you could look up businesses and get directions and navigate around and do all the things you can do with Google Maps. And these two J2ME apps had very little in common. And it's kind of laborious to launch them as well, because you have to put a new version up, you have to somehow encourage all the users to download them, you have to manage the X many variations that are in the field over time that all speak different versions of the protocol, and so on and so forth. And so I had this thought in 2006 when I joined that we should write a single sort of generic super app that would be able to just download a blob of XML and some kind of interpreted language, and the same generic app would either turn into your Maps application or it would turn into your Gmail reader. And so I was wandering around the company pitching this idea, and it was around that time for the first time that I saw a demo of the Android browser. And this is quite a bit before Android was released, but already that early browser showed a lot of the promise of what mobile browsers would become. It was very easy to use, it had full JavaScript support, it was pretty fast, it had all these great things, and I thought, wow, like, I'm wrong to think we should build a new generic client with a new XML format for specifying UIs. The browser is the app. The browser ultimately already has an interpreter in it. It can already render basically any UI you can imagine that you can design. It can already do everything. And it's standards-based and can be used everywhere. And so that's the thing that first shifted my thinking away from writing native applications to leveraging the browser technology. The other anecdote I want to tell goes even further back, and it's more of a personal anecdote. It's from my first week at Google. I was sitting down at the supper table with my family, and I was excited to communicate to my kids what I was doing now that I had changed jobs, and I was excited about being at Google. And my daughter was 7 at the time. So as we're sitting down for dinner, I said, hey, I work at Google now. Anna, do you know what Google is? And she looked at me like I was an idiot. Like literally, like I had a potato for a head or there was something wrong with me. She says, Daddy, of course I know what Google is. It's where I type in what I want and it takes me there. I thought, wow, what a great definition of search out of the mouth of my 7-year-old. You type in what you want and it takes you there. And that sort of takes me to the first bullet on my slide here. The browser is key in the end because it's the start of almost every activity. You go to it, you type in what you want, and it takes you there. The web being an open platform means that whatever it is you want to look up, whether it's sports scores or the stock price or the latest news, it's all out there, and somebody has put it out onto this platform for you to find. And as a corollary of that goes hand in hand, it's an excellent delivery mechanism. There's no versioning problem, there's nothing to install or update, you just go and get the application you want and go and use it. And so these three things together conspire to make browsers a really key piece of people's experience in their computers, and I believe ultimately also in their phones. There's some interesting technology trends that underlie this sort of behavioral explanation that I think are important as well. WebKit, through some series of happenstances, has really become the dominant rendering engine for mobile. Early versions of WebKit were originally embedded in Nokia's first smartphones, and those versions of WebKit really weren't capable to the level that I'm talking about here. But WebKit is also embedded in all the Android phones. It's also embedded in all the iPhones. It's also being embedded in new phones that are coming out from various manufacturers with their own custom operating systems. They're still choosing WebKit as the browser of choice. And so this is really important because it means with one sort of dominant implementation, everything more or less conforms to one set of standards and has more or less one set of bugs. And WebKit is also conveniently the reference implementation for HTML5. And this is really important because what it means is that as things get put into the HTML5 spec, they appear in WebKit at the same time as a way of saying, hey, this is not just something I've dreamt up, it's something that's practical, it's something that can really be implemented in a real device. Here it is in WebKit. And then that winds up appearing in these devices soon afterwards. And that's important because the HTML5 spec provides a lot of revolutionary capabilities, and that's actually going to form the meat of the demo portion of our talk, is looking at what these capabilities are and what difference they make. So all this put together, combined with my background in Java, might have a lot of you thinking, oh, well, this is some kind of write once, run anywhere speech. And so I can't quite make that claim for web browsers in HTML. The devices are going to have different DPIs, they're going to have different form factors, they're going to have different performance characteristics. It will be necessary to do something slightly custom for each device. But even though it's necessary to do something slightly custom, it's not the same effort as a complete rewrite. And the concrete example of that we have to show you at the end of the demos is the iPad version of Gmail, where we basically took the iPhone version of Gmail and said, well, gee, there's a lot more screen real estate on the iPad. What should we do with it? What can we do with it that's useful and powerful for the users? And so while custom changes needed to be made for each new platform for Gmail, those changes represent a reasonably small delta on the base code base. And it means it's easy to adapt your application to different devices and actually make sure that you can reach the entire potential audience. So with that intro in mind, I want to actually switch over to demos. The first demo I want to show is a photo viewing cover flow demonstration. So here I have a stream of photos, and I can flick them, and they flick around. And if I'm interested in zooming in on a photo, I can tap it, and it spins into place neatly. And you can see the cute little black glass underneath the photo effect in the reflection, especially on Elmo's nose. And so you can really see, here's the photo above, here's the black glass reflection, and it animates smoothly from side to side. If I flick it really hard, it can go all the way from one end to the other. It's a relatively smooth interaction that lets me go through these photos. And this is a little demo that some random person on the internet hacked up to demonstrate the power of CSS 3D transforms, because this is actually running inside the mobile Safari web browser. So this type of slick interaction is within reach for your web application. I mean, this is just something somebody hacked together as a proof of concept. And he's just getting photos from Flickr, shoving them in the web page, putting in the right transforms. He hasn't even bothered to optimize it. I mean, right now there's only 3 photos on the screen. So you're thinking, well, you could be really clever, and when photos are off the screen, you could stop rendering them, and you could only render the right ones, and so on. Actually, if you look at this in a bigger browser, like a desktop web browser or the iPad, you'll discover that all the pictures are being animated all the time. So there's a series of pictures off to this side that we can't see that are all being adjusted in their position, and off to the other side as well. That creates the full sort of stack of photos cover flow effect. And that's just being clipped out by the browser because it's fast enough to do that, to be that careless and that sloppy. So that's just amazing in terms of what you can do animation-wise. And the next demo I want to show is of a similar nature. It's actually Apple's help site. In this case, you can see that the application fills the screen from top to bottom. There's no evidence that it's a web application, because what they've done is they've put a meta tag into the markup to say that if the user bookmarks this to the home screen, it should suppress the browser's own UI. And so here I can scroll up and down. It feels very native. I can tap into a specific item to read about it. Notice the animation on the top toolbar. When I drill down, the buttons animate over to the side nice and smoothly, and when I go back, they animate back into place as well. So every little detail here is nicely accounted for. The scrolling that's implemented here is being done with a CSS 3D translate operation, and the scroll bar is being drawn by hand in JavaScript. So there's very little here actually being done by the browser. They basically implemented their own widget set in order to replicate the native iPhone behavior all in JavaScript. And if you do a search for a pastry kit on your favorite search engine, it'll bring up a bunch of people who have downloaded this code and analyzed it to figure out how it fits together. And you'll find that there's a lot of library support built in here. It looks like it was generated by an internal version of Dash Code, which is Apple's web development tool. So, I mean, it's just amazing what you can get here. Even the bounce effect, I love the bounce. When you hit the top, oops, I got to flick a little harder. When you hit the top of the screen, it bounces back into place. The scroll bar shrinks really small. And similarly for the bottom, you hit the bottom and it bounces back. These sort of little physical interactions are what make the iPhone such a pleasure to use. And they've mimicked them all here. No native help whatsoever. So, you know, that's the first demo. You know, nearly native UIs can be done. And it's all using CSS acceleration to make those two demos go. So the second one I want to show is Gmail. I'm going to tap on my Gmail bookmark. It's going to bring up my browser, flip me over to Gmail, and load it up. And in Gmail, you could load it up and get interrupted at some point. The network could drop out because you could be getting on the subway or in some other mobile hostile environment. So I've just put myself into airplane mode to simulate that. And when I go back to my Gmail here, it even warns me, turn off airplane mode to use Wi-Fi or access data. I can just ignore that, and the app is still running in the background. I can open up this alert, and the message loads even though I'm offline. So I have no data connectivity whatsoever because I'm in the subway or I'm in some other low connectivity situation. And the magic that's happening here behind the scenes in Gmail is that there's a database accessible to your JavaScript. And it's taken the body of my messages and put them in the database. And this has two effects. The first is that it means that things are available to me even in poor connectivity situation. And the second is that it makes the app pretty darn fast. I mean, let's pay attention for a minute to the transition between the thread list and the message. I can go back to my thread list, comes up right away. I can open up my message, it comes up pretty much right away. That short delay there is just the time it takes to read the message data out of the database. So the overall effect is that the app has a consistent speed whether you've been punted completely off the network, whether you're downgraded to Edge, or whether you're actually on 3G. So you get really good results that way. Additionally, I can also start up applications offline. So for that, I'm going to go into Calendar. Calendar is loading here, even though I have no connectivity. I can just cancel the fact that it's trying to load and open up an event and see all of my event details. I can navigate and see tomorrow's data, even though I have no connectivity. So I can see here that my wife has an appointment at a beauty salon, and whatever other details I might want to know about my day tomorrow. And once again, I'll take a minute to emphasize the speed. I mean, I'm in a web application, so you might think that we'd pay a price for that, a price for running this in JavaScript. But when I tap in on her appointment, it just appears instantaneously. I'm not really perceiving a delay here. I can return back to my day, and it also appears instantaneously. I can go back to the previous day, and it also appears instantaneously. So with sufficient care in how the programming is done, it can be made pretty fast. Calendar employs another trick which is really great for when you're online. If I go back so that I have data again, I'm going to give it a second to decide that I'm online, and go back into my calendar. As I go through the days, each day loads up instantly. But that should be impossible. I can't possibly have my entire calendar loaded into the device forever. But it seems that each time I tap next day, the day just pops into place as soon as I press it. I can do it again. And I can do it again. So what's happening here actually is if you watch carefully, whenever I load the next day, the little network spinner spins for a second. And that's actually loading the day after the day I'm viewing. So while I'm standing here looking at Saturday, April 10th, Calendar has already loaded Sunday, April 11th. And as soon as I bring Sunday, April 11th into view, it goes ahead and loads the 12th in the background on the assumption that I might be going forward looking for some event. And that's what gives you this really fast interaction all the time. So there's no end to the clever programming tricks you can do to make it work well. And the network loss dialog is just not a concern at all. You just go ahead and use it. It's all there. All the data is being cached in the database and available to me. So that concludes my section of the demos. I'm just realizing that I didn't jump back to the slides. I'm going to do that for a second just to show the bullets that go with this. So Gmail offline access enabled by SQL local storage using JavaScript to store the user's own data on the device. And then calendar startup using a technology called application cache, which actually stores your own application's JavaScript, HTML, images, all the resources it needs in order to be able to start up and run, so that even if I start the app when I'm offline, it can load from nothing. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Punit, who's going to talk about Buzz.
All right. So maybe you should stay here so we can coordinate this. So now that you have seen Alex's family schedule for the next few days, you should see my Buzz following stream and nearby stream so that you know who I'm following and what I'm doing. Okay, so before I do the demo, I'll quickly talk about Mobile Buzz. So as you know, Google Buzz is basically positioned as it is an easy way to share data, status, photos, things that matter to you with people that matter to you. And the way we've done it is you can do it in a closed way, so you can actually pick family or friends or groups of people that you care about and send them information, or you can make it completely public and you can show it to, you share it with all your followers or across the internet. When we were actually building the mobile section or the mobile part of Buzz, we realized that we want to do it in a way that we can leverage the power of the device itself. So we wanted to, the intimacy that the user had with the device, we wanted to use that in some way to make sure that Buzz was even more powerful. And so obviously location was the big feature there. And so we kind of attached, we decided to use the location of a person and give the user the ability to snap to that particular location and then post Buzz from there. Now, let me give you a quick demo on how this all works. This, again, is a web app. Let's see if this comes up. Great. So this was me. I had posted about an hour ago. And these are all my friends now, people around here or who are following, who have been kind of responding to it. But the key thing that I wanted to kind of point out here was it uses all the features that Alex was talking about. So, you know, app cache, the acceleration stuff, the canvas which renders stuff, just the local storage, all of the things that we were talking about has come seamlessly into a product where this all will make sense. So let's look at it. You have the following view. The following view is of people who you follow, whose status information or any of the information that they want to share with you is important to you. So you can kind of look around. You know, there is Linda posting about Battlestar. There's my team posting about some tips about Google Buzz. And you can decide that, you know, you really like this post by John Wiley, who's posting from Google. So you kind of tap on it, and I don't really know what he is posting about, which seems like a TCAP. Okay, so whatever it is, I think it's pretty cool, so let's just like it. So you just like it, and then inline, one person liked it, Punit Soni. Now this is all inline transitions in the web app, so it's in the browser. You could say, you know, this is pretty cool, you could just go ahead and type whatever you want to, or you could just cancel it and continue. The cooler part, however, is when you actually go into the nearby view. So the nearby view figures out or uses the geolocation abilities of the phone, figures out where you are, gives you an estimate of the place you are at. So, and then shows you public Buzz posted around you. And the use case that we are trying to solve here is what's happening around you? What's the buzz? Who's talking about what around you? So think of, you know, standing at 18th and Mission in San Francisco and saying, okay, well, what's the buzz? What's going on around me? And then you're in the nearby view. You can see people posting public buzz around you. And then you say, well, I'm actually interested in Tartine Bakery, which is right across the street. So you go to Tartine, you stand there, you snap to Tartine Bakery, the view changes, it picks up all the buzz that was posted to Tartine Bakery chronologically, and you now know what people are talking about right now and what they've been saying, you know, through time, how the cake is, what the bakery, what's the coffee, what's the ambience, etc. Let's go to nearby view. So there, it says you're near 2 Surrey Place, Toronto. Now, I'm hoping this is somewhere around here. 2 Surrey Place is this 2 Surrey Place? It probably
We'll
is.
have to assume it is.
Yes. So it's near 2 Surrey Place, Toronto. And then right below that, it says Mars Discovery District, which I know this is Mars. So, and 20 other places. You could decide to tap on it, and it'll give you a list of all the places. This is all web. It'll give you all the places. You could even decide to tap here and search for a place around here. You could say, I want to snap to Mars Discovery District, and then it'll give you only buzz that has been posted, which is pretty much me who was testing out this product while I was preparing for the demo. Or you could go into the nearby view, and then you can see basically all the people who are kind of talking. So that's nice. Okay, he is on the big screen, no question. And I know that I think Niall is here, and a couple of other people are here who we have been talking on Buzz with. But so you kind of open this one. You can click Show Map, and it'll give you, the location that this was posted from. You could kind of go around and look at, places. These are all addresses, but you could also find a place. So, for example, this one is a place, and Mars Discovery District. You can click on it. It'll take you to the place page for this place, and it'll show you all the other information you need. This is cool, but there's also something called Buzz Map on it. I will switch over to the iPhone device to show you the web version. So this is a map view of Buzz. And now we are obviously here, but let's zoom out a little bit and see how many people are buzzing around here. So these are all the people who have been buzzing around in the last few hours. And you can decide you want to tap on each one of them, and somebody really loves C#, somebody else is talking about, okay, I don't want to discuss that. But the cool thing is, that's nice, but how about we actually go to a different place? So let's go to New York and see what's going on. This is a web map. So this is not a native app. We're using web app. And these are all the people in New York who are talking about it. I feel very apprehensive of tapping on Buzz in these areas because there can be some very random things happening here. So there you go. Our enemies are innovative and resourceful. So anyway. Oh, God. It's good. It's all good. Yeah. So that I think this is quite entertaining, but I will kind of conclude the Buzz demo. So I do spend a lot of time playing with this map view and looking at what people are saying all over the world. But the point, to just bring this back, can we bring it to the browser? So click extra. So bring it back to the point we were trying to make. It was that the web app that you saw and the map view and the app itself is all in the browser. It uses all of the things we were talking about here. And so we do believe that this is the key delivery mechanism for a lot of the features that we can give the user in a sustainable and a scalable way. So it's not just a matter of, oh, I built it and it'll show up in one place. We can iterate quickly. If I think of a feature today, it's a matter of days that we can actually push it out and let everybody else have it, no updating required. I'll show you the last demo. This references the iPad point that Alex was making. So a few weeks ago, we were kind of discussing, obviously we really think that the tablet computing is interesting. It's a different form factor. We also believe that it's somewhere in the middle of, mobile and desktop. However, the cool thing here is it actually uses a lot of the things. The form factor is much more tuned to mobile apps. And so therefore, it's got a touch screen, it's got connectivity, you're outside, you can be constantly connected. And now, thinking about that, we said, well, the way we should do it is we should take the web app and we should try to render it in a different way so it's more tuned for a larger form factor. So if I can figure out how to use this, here you go. All right. Okay. So now, for those of you who use the mobile web Gmail, so the web app, the mobile Gmail interface, you will recognize this part. This is the Gmail web interface that's used on your Android or iPhone devices. We thought there's a lot more space here. We can do a lot more, so we can, create these, these scrolling interfaces. So this kind of scrolls independently. This scrolls separately. You can look at, you can decide you want to star this, and then you see it stars on the other side. You can unstar it, and it kind of connects the both scrolling spaces together. You can archive it. It goes to the next one. These things seem very simple, but the cool part is that that we could do it so quickly. So the innovation or the story behind this is that the web app itself is built in such a modular and seamless way that it's easy to actually extend it to other form factors, adapt them, and then deploy them. So things like these can be done very quickly, and it just works. That's the end of the demo portion here. I will give it to Alex to summarize.
So just a quick recap of the 5 demos. And we saw that CSS acceleration can be used to implement fancy 3D interactions like cover flow or really slick scrolling, just like native scrolling. And if you go back now and pay attention to how scrolling is in the web browser, you'll discover that by default on Apple's web browser, the scrolling is actually much slower than in the native apps. And so getting it to work exactly the same as native makes your web application feel that much more like a quote-unquote real app. Offline storage using SQL local storage to store the data of the actual user means that 5 megabytes of your mail can easily be stored offline, which adds up to quite a lot of messages at about 2 to 4 kilobytes apiece. Calendar startup using application cache, which Gmail also uses, means that no matter where you are, on the go, disconnected, whatever, you can always get back into your application. Mobile Buzz with location leverages the geolocation API. One thing I want to say about the geolocation API that I'm not sure that I've said yet is that it's amazing standardization success. If you think about standardization, anything that can be done more than one way has been done. And there are places where you drive on the left, and there are places where you drive on the right. There are places where the traffic lights are vertical, and there are places where the traffic lights are horizontal. So standardization is quite a problem. The geolocation API went from concept to reference implementation to real devices in less than a year and a half. So from the very first time we first wrote down, this is what the API should look like, to actually being able to call those APIs inside, in this case, the iPhone browser, was less than a year and a half. That's incredible speed, and that's the benefit of working with HTML5 and the WebKit trend that's sweeping mobile. And then finally, the Gmail 2-pane UI, showing how you can take an application and know it's not just a question of running it on a different form factor device. That doesn't just work, but with a comparatively small amount of effort, you can take that and apply the right UI for the device, giving users the best experience possible, even as is the case with the iPad when you don't actually have the physical device and you're only getting it by driving to Buffalo on launch day. So, and by the way, the US Customs people were really mean. I don't think they thought it really worked for Google. Anyway, so these technologies combine together to make a really compelling platform, a platform where you can build great UIs and so on. So with all these good things to say, the question must naturally occur, well, you can do all these things, Alex, sure. What can't you do? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the limitations and the boundaries that you do encounter. You can't do some very simple things, like vibrate the user's phone, or read their microphone in order to do voice recognition, or read the accelerometer to build accelerometer-based games. Generally, the ability to interact with the hardware or native OS is hard to achieve inside a pure web application. There are third-party solutions like PhoneGap, where you can use web technologies to build your app and wrap them inside a native wrapper that gives you access to these underlying technologies. But the base HTML5 spec currently is only really giving you geolocation as a way of accessing the hardware. But I think that that specific example is repeatable, that we can get these other functionalities into the spec, get them into the reference implementation, and get them out into the market relatively quickly. And as we keep creating more and more capable web apps and see more and more users using them and appreciating them, I think we can really change the face of what's possible in the browser. And that's ultimately the trend I'm betting on, that we'll see more and more of these features go in, that as the competition continues to heat up in mobile, every browser vendor will be anxious to make sure that they have a browser that's on the leading edge, that gives us all the access that we could want. So to step back for a minute and summarize the whole talk, and this would be a great time to start lining up at the microphones if you have questions. I want to say, our worldview basically is driven by there are fundamental shifts in mobile happening around us. The huge compute power of your devices, the sort of very intimate and personal relationship people have with a device that they actually carry around with them 24/7. The fact that there's incredible bandwidth and lowered prices and more usage. These things all together create a trend that brings the web to the mobile context and makes it the tool of choice for getting things done. HTML5 lets the app developers leverage these shifts and target phones more easily. It's not a question of write once, run anywhere, sure, but it is a question of build a really advanced web application and leverage all those things that you put in for one platform across many platforms. Things like the offline code in Gmail do not need to be rewritten from device to device. It's more things like the UI and the interactions and the way you want to do the animations. Those things need to be customized to the specific hardware target. But a lot of the guts of the application are invisible and work quite easily across the different platforms. The apps give the user unparalleled ease of use, and they're able to instantly update. So I don't know about you, but my App Store icon has a 40 on it because apparently I need to go and decide if I want to update 40 different applications. So, at some point that becomes a chore. The actual job of tending to this garden of icons that I have is going to become a problem. But with the web, it's easy. I just go to my favorite search engine, tell it what I want, and it takes me there. And I can just go and use it, get the newest version without any effort on my part. So that natural discovery channel, that natural distribution channel, that instant updating, that really delivers the power of the web to the end user. And finally, I'd like to say I think that at Google we've been pretty successful at doing things in the web browser where the first time you see them you think, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And I think that all of this investment is a continuation of that trend. I like to think that when people use our apps, they're delighted by the functionality they discover and think, wow, I didn't know I could do that. That's great. So without further ado, I think we've left lots of time for questions. I haven't managed to get anybody up to a microphone, but let's see if we can get some questions going. Go with the person on the stage right.
Okay. So I'm just curious about the broadband connectivity. I mean, we are on a wireless network. Once you start putting a lot of things on the web and a lot more people start using these services, is there going to be a concern about what we can download and how fast we can do it?
So I think the question is about whether or not we're concerned that we'll run out of bandwidth, that as more and more people onboard and start using these features, will the networks get too congested? Will it become too big of a load on things? I think that the answer to this is pretty much directly proportional to population density. So in areas that are very population dense, I think it's economically viable for the carriers to do things like put in new wireless technologies that require a base station every 500 meters, which literally is what the next gen spec is about, a base station every 500 meters. That's a lot of base stations if you're going to serve Muskokas. But in Toronto or in New York or in other populous places, I think that that's practical. So I think that what happens is that the economies of scale kick in where all the users are, and you get all those users on faster networks that have more bandwidth. And where the economies of scale aren't there, you do need to be using these offline techniques that I've been talking about to make it practical. But overall, I do think this is sustainable. I think, in fact, it's not just sustainable, but there's money to be made for all the players in delivering these services to the users.
And I think the reverse is also true. Like the other angle to this is that as technologies advance, you will see these web apps becoming lighter and needing less bandwidth to do more. So that is another nuance that we can consider, hopefully.
Hi, I'm Rock. I'm a UX architect guy. So I have a question based on, more focused on sort of the use case process for you guys at Google Mobile. Could you give us some deeper insight on sort of how you go through that use case process to pick the current feature sets you guys are going to focus on? And also, could you apply that to more real deal application areas on sort of your thoughts on deeper application areas like healthcare, financial services, things like that?
Sure. I think we'll both want to answer this one. I'm not sure who gets to go first.
Go for it.
I'll say, first of all, that at a company operating at our scale, it's not very uniform. It might look uniform and monolithic from the outside, but on the inside, there's lots of people using lots of different techniques. So I wouldn't be surprised if the two of us have very different responses. But the techniques I've seen used for doing use case analysis include things like even building paper prototypes of, this is what the screens will look like, and then bringing in people off the street under NDA that fit a certain demographic and literally showing them the page and saying, well, what would you do now? And they say, oh, I'll tap here. And then it's like, okay, that flips them over to page number 5. We'll show that to them. Now the screen looks like this. And you can walk through that and get some insight into what the user's doing. There's also generic UX research where you do a bunch of interviews, find out what people's existing behaviors are, and so on. And then that ultimately builds into a first iteration of the product, which is launched internally to what we call Google Dog Food. And all Google employees use it for some amount of time, and that could trigger yet another cycle of revision and so on until finally we think we have something that's worthy of trial by fire in the real market. So from my perspective, that's one way of executing the UX process.
And also, if you could just add, what's the balance between, or what are the issues that you guys have, like many of us have, on balancing product marketing feature sets with operational issues, and then also the tech issues as well? How does that sort of evolve into the use cases?
Let's take the prioritization of features separately and let Punit answer the UX question, and then we'll talk about that, which I see as more of a product question.
Okay, so I think you nailed pretty much what I wanted to say, so it's good. The only thing that I will add on to is I'll step back and talk about the big picture philosophy. So when we are actually thinking about products, the mandate that Larry gives us or Sergey gives us usually is, what's the biggest you can think? And so it's like we usually try to figure out what is the biggest scale at which we can make an impact, and that is usually the genesis of our ideas. So a simple example would be if you're trying to figure out how to provide access to newspapers over history to users through search. The initial idea will be, how can I make sure that every single printed paper ever in history is accessible to every user who's actually on online. So that's like the big picture statement that we start with. And then we kind of try to be a little bit more realistic and break it down and try to figure out what the product features, etc. should be. The rest of the stuff is pretty similar. We do usability surveys, we do interviews, we have scary little neuro sensors put on people and then look at where they're looking at on the screen, etc. So.
And realism isn't one of our strengths.
So what's the second question? Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, it wasn't really a question, just to sort of put more boundaries around the question. How do you, what are the uses around prioritization between product feature set, product marketing, internal operational, support issues, ongoing, and then I forgot the third one, but and then also technical capabilities. So how do you sort of bring it back down to say, okay, this is the bread box, and how's that bread box sort of prioritized?
So usually, I'll go back to my previous answer. Usually we try to take very, very big scale things. And so where it comes to, operational or technical limitations, we like to think that we have people who are probably some of the smartest from technical point of view, so they can figure out a way to do it. If the idea is compelling enough, then we do tend to put a lot of resources behind it to make sure that we can actually help it succeed. And we also have strong belief in the launch and iteration part. So the big picture vision might be that I'm going to provide access to everybody in the world to something, but it may be that the initial version or the initial vision the initial version, the vision doesn't come through. And we are pretty comfortable with that. Like a lot of the products that we launch initially are very limited in terms of what they can achieve. But in the big picture vision, we know that we're trying to build over years. Some of these are like 5-year, 6-year long products, which is like eons in the internet age. So I don't know if it really completely answers your question, but what I'm trying to say is we're not necessarily that constrained by operational and technical limitations. We try to think very big, and then we figure out our way around it.
Hi, Handel Kim. I have a question. In your closing slide, you mentioned one of the limitations or one of the obstacles of browser-based applications is the inability to interface with the hardware or the OS in general. Have you thought about using virtualization as a possible solution for that? Full disclosure, I work for a mobile virtualization company.
So really, I haven't. It's the short answer to your question. So I'll do a search for mobile virtualization after the talk and see what I find out. From my perspective, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit within the realm of what we can do still. There's a lot of room to make our applications more functional, to provide more integration between the apps, to provide more features, even without being able to vibrate the phone. And so the way I see it is that we should focus on getting all the low-hanging fruit value out to the users as fast as we can, while in parallel pushing on a standardization process that will ultimately get all this functionality into the browser for everybody. I think the really compelling reason to have all this stuff in HTML5 from my point of view is that not just Google can benefit from it. Everybody can write these apps and everybody can win. And so I'm kind of more focused on the long-term play. Not to say that there aren't some short-term alternatives that might work well, but I do think the long-term play is to do something standards-based.
Right. Well, I guess you could see virtualization as being kind of complementary to standardization. It removes a lot of the dependencies that you're trying to solve in different ways, but I'd be happy to give you my card later and we can talk about it.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Rob from Wallace Wireless. I've been building apps for about 10 years. Got any more questions? No, I'm just teasing you. You know, you made a good case for HTML5 tonight as an app platform. My question is, given that your iPod what'd you call it?
Two-pane UI.
Yeah.
Two-pane UI looked a lot like the Outlook I used about 7 years ago. Do you think that this can extend from the consumer to the enterprise from an HTML5 perspective as a platform? And is that where Google's going?
So let me make sure I got your question right. Your question is, do I think HTML5 is not just a consumer play but also an enterprise play?
Part one, yes.
Okay. So I think the answer is yes. We generally, if you look at how we've approached enterprise products, we've basically taken consumer products and tried to adapt them for enterprise. Even a product like Buzz that isn't obviously applicable to enterprise will be rolled out to our apps customers as something they can use within their domain. So definitely building things based on browser technologies for enterprise, I think is totally practical and is something that we'll pursue. I think all the same arguments apply. On the enterprise side, there's one additional argument in favor of doing web-based stuff, and that is that there's a lower total cost of ownership for the IT department because now they only have one piece of client software to manage. But you know, I think time will tell. Certainly there are formidable competitors in that space who I think will have a stranglehold on enterprise for many years to come.
I think there is
my last part will be, I guess then, do you think you can bake the security into it or not? Enterprise requiring a slightly higher level of security.
He's talking about authentication.
So, well, it depends. You could be thinking about authentication and you could be thinking about encryption. So
both.
The short answer is yes, I think you can bake the security into the operating system level. For example, you could imagine a fork of Android where the entire file system was encrypted at the operating system level, and that could only be decrypted if you unlock the device with your PIN. And you can also do you know, whatever authentication mechanism you need in the low levels to get authentication and encryption right. And then finally, the last piece of the security puzzle is remote control. So you want to be able to disable and enable features and/or wipe the device remotely as well. All these things, I think, can be built. They might need to be built into the base platform at quite a low level, but you know, at the end of the day, from an apps perspective, those are all the things that I think most of the apps developers are going to take for granted.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, it's Jonathan from the Biz Media. I have a question related to video and HTML5. I really like how HTML5 has the built-in video tag, and it's moving to a standard for video, which is H.264. My question about that is H.264 is proprietary format that's a closed license. How do you guys feel about having a standard that's a closed license versus something like Theora, which is an open license for decoding video through HTML5?
Big question. Interesting question. I haven't thought about it much, so I'm not sure I can give you a satisfactory answer. I think that for the mobile space specifically, I'm not sure how much this matters, in the sense that the cost of buying into the closed system is going to be built into the cost of the device that the user buys. And you don't see as much sort of, oh, I'll just buy some piece of hardware and slap Linux on it in the mobile space as you might see in a computer space. So as long as the pricing is right, I still think most of the users can benefit. And so then I think from my point of view, it would come down to, specifically focusing in on mobile again, it would come down to which codec is actually the best codec. And whatever codec gives you, the longest playback time, the best video decode quality, the best audio, that would be the codec that I would prefer to see win. And if that's an open codec, then by all means, we should embrace that and push that into these standards. And if it's a closed codec, then from a mobile-specific perspective, I think that that's okay. The problem with your question for me is that it also touches non-mobile. And in the non-mobile space, I'm not sure the answer I just gave is really correct, because it's different when it's different when you're trying to serve a market that has a lot of computers in it, where the user hasn't necessarily paid for access to this proprietary thing.
And I have been using the HTML5 beta in YouTube, and it's awesome.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks.
We'll let Andre know. He'll feel happy.
He sure will. Andre is the PM. He works in London with that team. Other side?
One of the aspects of native app distribution, like through the App Store, is that it's really easy to buy stuff, or at least it's really easy to buy apps. I'm wondering what your model or your vision is for enabling commerce on the open web, whether it's buying content or whether buying larger things, but being able to do that outside of an app store.
So this is something that we've been thinking about. At this point of time, I think the way the evolution has gone about for this is we've tried to make sure that we can advance the standards and bring it to a place where there is, first of all, enough examples, leader examples in the market of web apps being used in places as replacements or complementary to the native app. And then we've been trying to advance on the browser side, trying to help push the APIs and the standards forward so we can actually have access to some of the kind of the limitations that you were talking about initially so that we can overcome them. I think that once the critical mass comes, such a market could potentially evolve naturally. Whether it is e-commerce oriented where you're actually buying and selling, or whether it is a repository from where you can quickly access stuff, I think it's a vital cog for the overall ecosystem. So there's definitely strong potential for that.
It's also really interesting to go online and do some search for people's App Store experiences to find out how people in the field are actually finding monetizing through the App Store. There's a lot of really good stories out there. It's worth looking into.
So the bottom line is, yes, we should think of an ecosystem for discovery and for people to almost sell their wares, if you want to call that. But we have to be very careful about how this is done, given that this is open, this is web, and I think the biggest store is the Google search bar. Just search for it and you find it.
But do you see commerce being tied back to the platform again, or do you see it as a way of one platform getting advantage over another, or is it something that can be completely open on the mobile web?
Of course, I think commerce, look, the way the App Store has evolved, the biggest thing there has been the fact that it has provided developers an avenue to monetize and probably monitor some aspects of what they're trying to build, which has led to an explosion. So there's no question, I think, that providing incentive structures for people to be able to build these things will matter. So the answer is yes. We just don't know exactly what the right business model or the right structure around this should be.
One of your first slides mentioned how mobile app usage has really taken off in markets where there's unlimited data or data at a flat rate. And I'm just wondering, in a market here that we have in Canada, that's not quite the case yet. So I'm wondering, how do you think that's going to be affected? How is it going to hinder the growth of mobile applications? How do you think, that will be affected there?
You need to get unlimited data plans quickly. So I'm coming in from Mountain View. I came here and I was flabbergasted. I couldn't figure out what was going on with the data plans. And we can have a much longer discussion on that, but the bottom line is, yes, I think wherever you have flat rates and wherever you have like this all-you-can-eat kind of style of data plans, we do see an explosion in data. As time goes by, I think market pressures will probably make the players actually put these options out. I would say even now it's relatively much more liberal than in many other markets.
There's an anecdote for me that connects with this, which is a friend of my wife's came to me to ask advice about this iPhone she was planning on buying, and she wanted to know, would it really do the things she wanted, and what were the pros and cons. And so we walked through all of her use cases, and it had all the functionality she wanted. And I said, really the only disadvantage is the data plan. If you don't mind paying what it's going to cost you to own the phone, I think you'll be very happy with the device. And so she was very excited, and she went and she ordered it, and she got it. And a month and a half later, I encountered her again, and I said, oh, how are you enjoying your new iPhone? Expecting her to, gush about how great it was and how wonderful it was. And she's like, well, it's really great, but it's really expensive. And here was somebody who, had been warned in advance about the cost, and yet somehow, when she actually got the sticker shock of her bill, it kind of ruined the purchase for her. I don't think that she'll keep her data plan indefinitely. I think whatever her contract limit is, if the pricing hasn't changed, that she'll turn it off. And we need a way to make sure that there's value for the carriers in this environment. And obviously right now the carriers feel the best value is the type of pricing they have put out there today. But I think we've seen that you can get a lot more usage and a lot more value by changing how the pricing is done.
Yeah, I think it's the typical reservation price concept, right? I think that as you have unlimited, there'll be explosion of usage, and the carriers will get a lot more value also. But I do believe that when we actually get to a place where wherever we have flat rates, there's much more significant usage. And it actually benefits everybody. It benefits the developers, it benefits the carriers, and it benefits the consumers.
Thanks.
Marcus Latzel from Palomino. My question is around the local storage and the offline capability that you talked about for HTML5. So we're definitely looking into that right now. But I'd like to get your opinion on how applicable it is in the more enterprise setting when you're looking at higher security standards, say e-health, financial data. I think a similar question like that was before, but specifically around the offline storage. What's your take on that? And maybe you have some examples or experiences around that as well.
So the question is again concerned about data stored in the offline storage and how secure it is. And so, the bottom line is, if you have really sensitive data, then it can wind up on your device either through the browser's normal cache or through the online storage. And if that's a serious concern to you, like that it would be life-threatening or otherwise seriously damaging, then there's not much way around it today other than wiping your device, which I think is a level of hassle that most users aren't willing to go to. So maybe in some of these applications, you would have to give up on offline as a way of accelerating things and perhaps store a portion of the data on the server side. But I could imagine a scenario where you, for example, chose a different 128-bit key to encrypt each block of data that was local to the device, and every time the user logged in, you would go and get those keys from the server, store them into memory, use them to decrypt, and throw them out when you were done. And that way, that's reasonably hard to crack, and if 128 bits isn't enough, then you double it or you double it again until you finally feel that it's secure enough. At the end of the day with security, it's an endless arms race as far as I'm concerned. You can build the best safe you can build, and I'll build a better blowtorch. And so you have to decide what the level is that you need to go to make it happen. At the end of the day, the most secure is not to send the user the data at all.
Do you see software developers jumping on local storage for these kind of applications? Truth
be told, I think that we're pretty much on the bleeding edge of actually using local storage. I think that there's few applications out there in the world that are using these features as extensively as we are. So I would guess that in these applications where there are sort of concrete disadvantages to using these technologies, that there will be even slower adoption. But I don't think in this case, I'm not sure, whether you wrote a web app or a native app, I'm not sure how you deal with the problem, because at the end of the day, if you want to store data on the user's device, there is a way to get at it, and there is a way to read it. And so if you have really sensitive data, I mean, the easiest answer is to say transmit it over the network over and over again, or don't transmit it at all.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of that is also that we are building these leader apps also because we want to set an example of what is possible. And given our hope is that given our distribution and the number of people who can adopt these things, it will actually provide some sort of example apps that other developers will go. So yes, it's not widely used yet, but on the flip side, it's also these are the leader apps right now. These are the most cutting edge stuff that's out there. So hopefully people will pick up on them and then use the standards. Our intention is we believe in the web. We are a web company. So we believe and we want to make sure that we can push the boundaries as much as we can. And even if in the short term that means that there are certain things that our apps may lack, maybe access to certain hardware, APIs, etc. We are willing to live with that, knowing that A, as we push the boundaries, we will have further access to these things and the ecosystem will become rounded, and B, that other developers and other users and consumers will become used to getting this model of web-based apps and adopt them, and then it'll become more popular. So that's our bread and butter basically.
My name is Yan Yu. I'm an entrepreneur and president of Prognex Corporation. We're a startup company building next generation productivity tools. And we're faced with this question right now, is that we want to create a mobile application for our tool set. But after seeing this amazing demo, we're debating whether or not to go with a native application or a web application. And the question is, again, it's been addressed already, the enterprise software. It's not really about can we build this application? It's really how can we deliver it to our clients and how do we deliver it to our customers? So that's really the question. And I guess Google App Store has launched for the Google App Engine and so forth. How quickly can we see that for the mobile devices, especially for web applications? Thanks.
So I don't want to make any forward-looking statements. But maybe I'll use the generic, if it's a logical idea, somebody at Google is probably thinking about it, and we might eventually do something.
Actually, you should make it even more slicker. If it sounds reasonable and logical to you, then most probably somebody at Google must be thinking about it.
So there's Great, probably thanks. the biggest non-answer you could hope for.
So you probably didn't get anything from that answer, but you felt pretty good.
In the meanwhile, I do think you can promote your application either through the existing app stores by writing wrapper apps or through google.com by buying advertising, and these are ways to make customers aware that your application exists. And even if you, let's say you decide that what you want to do is write a native iPhone app, even in that case, buying advertising on various online services to make sure people are aware so that they look for it in the App Store is probably key, because once your application drops out of the new category on the App Store, it's very hard to get any attention. So you want to find ways of getting yourself in front of the users, whether that be through press hits or through advertising, to make sure that they keep looking for your application to download it or looking for your website to navigate to it.
It also depends upon which platforms and which demographics and which consumers you're looking at, right? So, as Alex mentioned, you could build a web app, and then you feel that you need to target certain native platforms, so you could build wrapper apps and then put them in the App Store. The incremental work required to put a wrapper around a web app is not that significant, and that would provide you access to that platform also. And also, since you are innovating constantly on the website, your wrapper app or your native app will continuously get upgraded also. So there's a lot you can do. It just depends upon which way you want to, what do you want to target initially.
And then one final thought, based on what you said your apps are about, RIM did acquire Torch, so that might be relevant to your decision.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Rajesh from NetSuite. I had a quick question just about trends in terms of, it seems to be there's this culture of disposability when it comes to mobile apps, or that there's a high percentage of apps that are basically used once and kind of thrown away. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but if you do, are you seeing that impact the way developers approach how they architect mobile apps compared to, say, a few years ago where you'd have like a larger roadmap which could span months or years? Are you finding that's being shortened and are corners being cut, that sort of thing?
So, I mean, I'll let you take the architecture part of the question. My kind of thought on this is that I don't think there must be a special business model to figure out if you want to build an app which the developer wouldn't want it to just be quickly disposed. They might want it to be sticky and to be useful. But if it is inherently that you are creating a large number of apps and these apps there's a lot of churn and a lot of users are using it, and you have figured out some kind of a monetization model which allows you to make some money out of even this high churn process, even then I would think that it's probably in your benefit to build web-based apps because they're going to be much simpler to innovate and simpler to push out. So I think that, to Alex's point, once it's not in the top part of your app store, it's gone. A lot of people also have very little attention span when it comes to specific apps. And so therefore apps which are focused more on productivity, social, communication, things that tie in with things that you use your phone for tend to be a little bit more sticky. But yes, there's significant churn beyond the top,
Just a quick
3 or
follow-up.
4%.
In terms of moving toward WebKit or web-based apps, do you find there's a climate for long-term subscriptions to like software as a service-based applications in the mobile space? Or is it that people are comfortable with going to a web store, buying an app once, having it installed? Is there any sort of data between the two? Is there a preference, or is there like a trend of one versus another with consumers?
I personally haven't seen any data to support a subscription model versus a buy once model. That doesn't mean it's not out there. I just haven't seen it. Possibly that's a shortcoming of being at Google, where we can put monetization second until we get the user experience exactly right. I haven't worried about whether a single sale is.
What are you talking about?
Okay, well, might be different points of view on that.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, he always keeps thinking about how to build cool stuff, and I'm like, where's the money? Come on, you can't do this. Yeah.
So I don't know. The short answer is I don't know if a subscription model would be more successful. I can say this, that so far as I'm aware, there's not one real subscription model type app on the market. There are apps where you buy content for the app, like you buy books or you buy music or whatever it is, and there are apps where you pay one price up front. There are some apps, I think, out there now where you can unlock levels with money, but I have not seen a subscription-oriented application.
Yeah, the app itself can be a delivery mechanism for content, which is the subscription unit. And so that is pretty common. Like, you have a reader and you're pushing in content through that reader, which you're paying for. The reader itself might be subsidized or cheaper for all you know. So those things happen, but yes, we haven't really analyzed or seen much of that.
Thanks.
Hi, David Michaels, MNext. You just mentioned wrapper apps. Is that like a hybrid app where someone downloads an actual app and then they create an HTML5 browser-based application, and that application can now access, the web-based application can access the downloaded version for added functionality?
That's right. So PhoneGap, for example, is one of these wrapper tool sets where you embed your JavaScript and HTML and so on into the binary, and then you can provide entry points into the Objective-C code or whatever the native platform code is that you can call from JavaScript and get a response. So for example, if you wanted to take a photo, you can invoke the native camera and take a photo and then get the photo data back from that back into your web application. So these wrapper applications basically give you that extension mechanism to do anything you can do in native from JavaScript. All you have to do is write the entry points yourself.
Excellent, thank you.
I think we're at our last question here.
Hi. So all the cool, rich interactivity that you showed is really great. I use a BlackBerry, and the experience on it is pretty crappy. Do you have any insights on what RIM is doing about it? Because I don't know if I should be looking for a new device anytime soon.
My PM partner just told me not to say anything. I think in that case, I can only repeat what I've already said, which is RIM bought Torch Media, and Torch Media makes WebKit for mobile phones. So you can draw your own conclusions.
And so there might be light at the end of the tunnel.
And we build apps that work well on those kind of browsers. So our hope is, we keep building that, and hopefully others will do something. Okay.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
So on behalf of Mobile Monday, Alex and Jolyn, who aren't here right now, but Dal is certainly here, and he's done a great job organizing this event. We'd like to thank Alex and Punit for joining us.
We'd also like to thank Brad and the AV team and Mars for all their help for tonight's event. Thank you very much.
So hopefully we can have you back maybe in a year's time to hear all the latest things that you guys are working on. There's really some cool things going on down in Waterloo. Thanks very much for attending, and we can certainly all go to the bar outside and patronize
Continue
the
some
bar.
networking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
you.